Good evening, my dear students. Welcome to the second session for chapter number 8 of Auditing and Assurance subject, which is Analytical Procedures. I hope that whatever we discussed with respect to analytical procedures in our last session is clear to all of you. And in case still you have any queries, please send in your queries so that the same can be resolved, right? And students, today will be completing with this chapter. And further, we'll be discussing the descriptive questions, the MCQs, the case scenarios, and all these questions along with the answers, key pointers have already been uploaded. So please download them. Okay? So many of the students have joined. Good evening, Parth, Sandeep, Pooja, and Pratiksha. So without further waiting, I'll be starting with the rest of the topics which are left because I need to complete this chapter today. Further, I also want to discuss all the questions with you people, right? So analytical procedures, what we understood in the last class is, I'll just recapitulate it in say next 5 minutes, that routine checks cannot be depended on in order to disclose all mistakes or manipulations, right? So auditor will have to perform certain analytical procedures, and SA 520, the name is what? Analytical procedure. It says the definition of analytical procedure which has been given in SA 520 is evaluation of financial information. Now, remember that salary example that we did, through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. Further, it also encompasses investigation as is necessary of what? Identified fluctuations, relationships that are inconsistent with other relevant information and that differ from expected values by a significant amount, right? Then we saw that analytical procedure includes what? Consideration of various comparisons of the entity's financial information, which can be with prior period data, with the industry information, or with the expectation, which can be management budgets or the expectations developed by the auditor, right? And in consideration of relationships, we saw that not only among the elements of financial information can these analytical procedures be applied, but also second point is what? Financial data and non-financial information. For example, the number of employees, the interest rate, the examples that we discussed. Okay? Then we saw that when the auditor is performing analytical procedure as a risk assessment procedure, it is dealt in SA 315. The name of SA 315 is identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. And SA 520 deals with the auditor's use of analytical procedure as substantive analytical procedures, and near the end of audit where the auditor has to form overall conclusion. Okay? So what is the objective? So we saw that the objective is to obtain relevant, reliable audit evidence when performing substantive analytical procedures. And the second is near the end of audit. I explained this in quite detail. So near the end of audit, when the auditor is forming the overall conclusion, so he need to see whether the financial information is consistent with his understanding of the entity, which he obtained by applying what? Analytical procedures. Okay? And the last topic, no, we did 2 more topics, that is timing of analytical procedures, whereby we discussed that at the planning phase, at the testing phase and completion phase, an experienced auditor uses analytical procedure at all the stages of audit. And then we did that when the auditor is deciding as to whether to use test of details or whether to apply substantive analytical procedures, like what factors he'll consider. So we saw that these are the various factors like availability of data, disaggregation, account type, source, predictability, nature of assertion, and inherent risk, right? Why? Because unless and until, let's say, take example of availability of data. Data is available on which analytical procedure is to be applied. Auditor cannot apply analytical procedure. So what is the option available to the auditor? He'll apply test of details. Okay? And further, we did this timing of analytical procedures. Okay? So let me just have a look at the query, if any, from your side. ठीक है. Now, students, this topic, timing of analytical procedure, there is another topic with it, which is purpose of analytical procedures. ठीक है. So let me just give you an example. Then you will be in a position to understand this more clearly. Let's say, see if the wages expense as a percentage of sales from the last few years, the trend has been that the wages amount as a percentage of sale is near around 10%, 11%, 10%. This is the data of the last few years. Okay? However, this year it has been 20%. So this is something unusual now. So I can say the purpose of applying analytical procedure by the auditor is to identify whether any unusual circumstances are there or not. Okay? It might be due to manipulation, it might be due to fraud, it might happen that the organization, in order to increase its cost, has shown fake employees this year. Hana? So it is, I told you this in the last session also, that analytical procedure is what? It is an attention directing process. Okay? Let's say the GP ratio is inconsistent as compared to the trend of the prior years or as compared to the industry trend, right? So it is an indication to the auditor that something unusual is there. Okay? So it directs the attention of the auditor, that auditor sees something unusual is there, you need to perform certain other procedures also. Okay? And thereafter the auditor may decide as per his professional judgment that ठीक है, test of detail भी करना पड़ेगा, detail checking भी करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है? So this is a very simple topic. These examples relating to GP ratio, wages, everything is mentioned in a module, so you can just read them as a homework. Otherwise, the purpose which is mentioned, I'll read the important lines here. So analytical procedure use comparisons and relationships. Why? What is the purpose? To assess whether account balances or other data appear reasonable. Okay? So these are helpful in detection of unusual state of affairs or mistakes in the account. When we saw that wages has suddenly increased from 10% or 11% last year to 20%, this is something unusual. Na? Okay? So if differences are found to be material, the auditor would ascertain the reasons there. What is the reason? The auditor will ask the management and assess whether accounts have been manipulated to inflate or suppress the profits. Very simple. Hana? So I can conclude that analytical procedures may help identify the existence of unusual transactions or events, amounts, ratios, trends that might indicate matters that have audit implication. This is basically saying that it is an attention directing process. Unusual or unexpected relationships that are identified may assist the auditor in identifying the risk of material misstatement, especially risk of material misstatement due to fraud. Very important conclusion. This summarizes basically as to why an auditor performs analytical procedure. What is the purpose when the auditor is performing analytical procedure as a substantive procedure? So it is just a summary of what we have done in the last session. Tell me quickly whether till here everything is clear or not. And Charu is asking about scope of analytical procedures. So Charu, you will have to write the answer the way it is given here. Okay? And then see, with respect to timing of analytical procedure, if you get a question with respect to planning, planning phase, testing phase, completion phase, so whatever has been written in your module, you have to write that. Right, Charu? Okay. Now, we are again and again discussing that auditor will perform analytical procedures. Before applying the analytical procedures, auditor will consider various factors, right? Now, I have got a number of queries with respect to this topic which we are covering just now. That, ma'am, what are the various techniques, what are the various types of substantive analytical procedures that an auditor can perform? And students, This is a very important topic because here you will be able to know as to what what techniques can be applied. And also it is very easy. Why? Because wherever I have given you examples of applying analytical procedures, I have given you these examples only. Okay? But the formal name like trend analysis, ratio analysis, so you all are very much aware, reasonableness test and structured modeling, that these names will be studying just now. Okay? So what are the techniques when the auditor is applying analytical procedures? So what are the various techniques? So the first one is trend analysis. Now quickly tell me, I need the answers. What is meant by trend? What do you understand by trend? Quickly, I need answers from your side. So it is basically a general direction. Just try to understand, need not write, it is just a dictionary meaning. A general direction in which something is developing. Okay? So I just gave you an example. If you remember that wages from the last 3 years, it has been 10% of 10% of the sales amount. Okay? But now this year, there has been an unusual change in the trend compared to the last year or compared to the last 2-3 period. So when an auditor compares the trend, compares the current year financial statement data with respect to the last year figures, it is what he's performing, what trend analysis. That is the direction in which a particular thing is developing. This is just a dictionary meaning for your understanding. You need not write it. Okay? Students, can I say this is a very commonly used technique, because it often happens now that when you are analyzing a financial statement item, you will consider, okay, let me just have a look as to what was the trend in the last 4-5 years. Was it an increasing trend? Okay? So it is a most commonly used technique, and what auditor is doing, he is assessing, you can say he is assessing the current year data by analyzing the last year trend. Okay? With respect to the last year or with respect to 2 or more last years. Okay? And in case there has been any change, is it a problem? See, as a change is not a problem, but the auditor need to understand what is the factor behind this change. Hana? See, auditor will have to understand, and if any account fluctuation is there, how the auditor is comparing it? He is comparing the current year financial data with respect to the data that is appearing in the last 2-3 years. Okay? So he's analyzing the trend. Okay? Very simple, but obviously you need to write what has been mentioned, the keywords that has been mentioned. So students, Surabhi is saying that trend means increase or decrease in something over a period of time, which is absolutely correct. Sandeep is saying trend means comparing current data with prior period. Correct. Okay. So yes, example, because your example is absolutely correct. He has said that GP ratio of the current year, comparing it with the previous year or with the GP ratios of the last 2-3 years. Okay? So this is what is called trend analysis, and this is one of the techniques of what analytical procedures. Very simple. Let us just have a look from the module. So it is a commonly used technique. See, I'll be marking the keywords here. So it will help you in understanding as to how to learn. So commonly used technique hai. What happens here is comparison of the current data with the prior period balance, okay, or with the trend in 2 or more prior period balances. Okay. So auditor is evaluating whether current balance of an account is in line with the trend established in the previous balances. Okay. If there is any change, the auditor needs to ignore it. No. He will be understanding the factors that may cause the change. Okay? So what exactly the auditor is doing? He is analyzing the account fluctuation. There has been a fluctuation from the usual wages percentage to sale in the actual, which has happened this year, by comparing the current year to the prior year information or several years. Okay? And the example that has been given is this, and this beautifully explains this trend analysis. Let us read it together. The auditor may compare the salary paid by the company during the year under audit with salary paid by companies for several earlier years. There may be some percentage increase in the salary expense over the years. However, an unusual increase in such expense may indicate fraudulent payments which have been made to what? Fake employees. Okay? So simple. So this is about what? Trend analysis. And the second is what? Ratio analysis, which I'm sure you all are, very well versed with as to what all ratios can be calculated. So tell me, can I, as an auditor, can I calculate the ratios with respect to P&L item also and balance sheet item also, or only P&L or only balance sheet item is possible? So just send in your reply as to both, or if you want to say only balance sheet, write only balance sheet, yeah, only P&L. So I am saying that what all financial ratios can be calculated. Can it be calculated only using the P&L item, or only using the balance sheet item, or both? I need replies quickly, students. So yes, ratio analysis is useful for analyzing asset as well as asset and liability accounts, as well as revenue and expense account. Okay? Students, tell me, see, when you are considering as to, let's say last year the debtor balance was 10 lakh and now it has been 20 lakhs. So when you compare this, like from last year, debtor balance has increased to 20 lakhs vis-a-vis the other situation whereby you are comparing the debtors as a percentage to sales this year and debtors as a percentage to sale last year. Which comparison is going to give you more information? The second one. Hana? Why? Because the relationship between the debtors and the total sales, it gives you a more clear picture vis-a-vis that the increase in the debtors amount. Okay? So it says that at times it might not be possible to just predict one balance sheet item on its own. Individually, it cannot be predicted. But as a percentage, as a relationship with some other account, the way I gave example of what debtors and sales, it is more predictable. Okay? And we all know that the ratio analysis like GP ratio, for example, GP ratio, you can compare the GP ratio of your client with that of the prior period or with that of the other companies in the similar industry. Okay? And what all ratios can be calculated? Your debtor turnover, your stock turnover, your freight expense as a percentage of sales revenue. Okay? So many of you have replied that both balance sheet and P&L items, right? So this is what is mentioned in ratio analysis, that it can be used in asset and liability as well as revenue and expense. An individual balance sheet account is difficult to predict on its own, but its relationship to another account is often more predictable. Okay? What are the examples? These are the example, and this is the example as to how the GP ratio can be compared with the prior period or with respect to the industry data. Simple. So we have done trend analysis and we have done ratio analysis. Both the techniques are very simple. Now the third one is what? Reasonableness test. And students, if you remember, when I started explaining you analytical procedures, I gave you an example of what number of employees multiplied by salary per employee. And I told you that this is one of the analytical procedures that an auditor can use. Okay? So basically what an auditor does when he is applying reasonableness test as an analytical procedure is, he is using non-financial data. He is using what? Non-financial data. Okay? First of all, tell me one more thing. What is reasonable? I can say fair enough. Hana? So what an auditor will say that considering the number of employees, let's say auditor asks the management tell me what are the number of employees. Management says 100. And what is the salary? The management says it is somewhere around some employees get 1,000 and some gets 1,100 or let's say 1,200. Okay? So auditor says, okay. So it will be reasonable if the salary is near around 1,10,000. So reasonable, fair enough. Hana? So auditor is using what? Number of employees. Tell me, is the auditor using the data of the last year? No. Prior period data is not being used. Now, current year non-financial data is being used when an auditor is applying what? Reasonableness test. And where do we apply prior period data? Prior period comparisons in the trend analysis. So I can say, unlike trend analysis, reasonableness test is not dependent upon what? Prior period data. Okay? It uses non-financial data of the organization in order to assess what should be the current year balance. Okay? So here I am analyzing what should be the current year total salary, and I'm just using a non-financial data, which is what? Number of employees multiplied by salary per employee, and I'm saying that iske आसपास होना चाहिए, that should be fair enough. ठीक है? Reasonableness. ठीक है? ठीक है? So what can be the other examples? There are various other examples where the auditor can use the non-financial data. If you remember, I gave you another example. For example, the interest rate. That is, let's say auditor thinks that, okay, there has been a loan, let's say 10 lakhs loan at the rate of 5%. So 50% interest amount expense is what? It is reasonable. So he's using a non-financial data, which is what? 5%, the interest rate. Okay? So let us have a look from the module. Unlike trend analysis, analytical procedure does not rely on events of prior periods. You can get a true false on this, that reasonableness test rely on the events of the prior period, which is what? False. Okay? But upon non-financial data for the audit period under consideration, you can again get a true false, that reasonableness test does not depend upon the non-financial data, which is again what? False. Okay? These tests are generally more applicable to income statement. See, reasonableness is what? Okay, that considering this amount and considering this non-financial data, it appears to be reasonable. So it is more applicable to what? Income statement accounts. Okay? So what are the examples? See, interest expense against interest bearing obligations, raw material consumption to production quantity. Ki itna quantity is again what? Your non-financial data. Ki itna quantity has been produced to raw material kitna consume hua hoga in rupees. Okay? Same way, wastage and percentage of scrap against production and raw material consumption. Ki itna consumption hua, itna quantity ka, तो कितना वेस्टेज या स्क्रैप हुआ होगा. ठीक है? सी सेल्स डिस्काउंट कमीशंस अगेंस्ट सेल्स वॉल्यूम, कि इतना सेल्स वॉल्यूम है तो 5% अगर सेल्स कमीशन है, सो व्हाट शुड बी द अमाउंट. ठीक है? सो दिस इज आल्सो वेरी सिंपल. We have done 3 techniques, which are what? Trend analysis, ratio analysis, and reasonableness test. And the last is what? Structural modeling. Okay? Last is what? Structural modeling. So what is structural modeling? Students, see, when the auditor is using certain statistical models, you must have done statistics in your foundation now. So there you must have done linear regression, whereby you try to calculate, one variable which is dependent upon the other variable. Okay? So a modeling tool, what is structural modeling? A modeling tool constructs a statistical model from financial, non-financial data of prior period. Why? To predict the current account balances. Example, linear regression. As such, you need not, see as to how to calculate the coefficient of correlation and all for the purpose of audit subject. So here only you need to learn that example of structural modeling is what? Linear regression. Okay? So I hope this is clear. So we have done all the 4 techniques, and students, we have discussed these a number of times. And if you remember, let me just take you through the first paragraph. See, it says, so see, since routine checks cannot be depended upon to disclose the mistakes, ठीक है. All mistakes and manipulations that may exist. Certain other procedures may also have to apply, like what comparisons, trend ratio analysis, in addition to what reasonableness test. ठीक है. So we started our chapter with all these techniques only. ठीक है. And now we are discussing them in detail in this topic. ठीक है. So I hope what are the techniques. See, descriptive type question can always come on these techniques. ठीक है. Or you may get a question as to the auditor is doing this. Which of the following techniques is auditor following. ठीक है. So MCQ के लिए, true false के लिए और descriptive के लिए, this is a very important topic. Now students, quickly tell me, is it clear to all of you? ठीक है. So tell me, is there any doubt so that I can start with the next topic, which is again very, very important. You may get this entire topic for 4 marks, or there are 4 points. You may get an individual topic for 4 marks or 3 marks also. Okay? So very important from your descriptive type of questions, from the point of view of descriptive type. But before starting with this topic, I want all of you to reply as to whether you have understood whatever we have done so far. ठीक है. So now, analytical procedure as substantive test. Students, when I discuss with you the various factors that the auditor will consider when he's deciding as to whether to apply analytical procedure or test of details, so we discussed all these factors. ठीक है. So if you see, the explanation says that the auditor's subjective procedure at his substantive procedure at assertion level, that is as to whether to perform test of detail or analytical procedure or a combination of both. Before deciding that, or in order to decide that, auditor will first see all these factors, है ना? Because let's say data is not available, तो analytical procedure नहीं लगेगा ना. Auditor will have to perform what? Test of detail. ठीक है. So now what is this topic? This says, now the auditor has decided that he will be applying analytical procedures. Analytical procedures will be used as substantive tests. Now, at this moment, when he has already seen all those factors, he is now deciding as to various things which needs to be considered when he is applying substantive analytical procedures. He has already decided that ठीक है 330 में, whereby essay 330 में, where I have to perform substantive procedures, okay, I'll be applying what? Analytical procedures as the substantive test. ठीक है. So उस time पे what all factors he'll consider. So we'll be doing all these factors in detail one by one. I hope that differentiation between the two topics is clear. पहले वाले टॉपिक में तो he was deciding whether to applying analytical procedures or not. और इस टॉपिक में he has decided that he'll be applying analytical procedures, but when he is applying the analytical procedures, what all shall auditor do? See, when designing and performing substantive analytical procedures, either alone or in combination with test of details, that is whether he is performing them alone or he will decide as to which particular substantive analytical procedure he needs to perform, which of the techniques he need to apply, which we just have done, Hana, and his assessment as to which particular substantive analytical procedure is to be performed. Substantive analytical procedure करना है, that has been confirmed. ठीक है. उसके बाद when the auditor is applying the substantive analytical procedure, उसमें auditor क्या consider करेगा कि particularly कौन सा substantive analytical procedure करना है. And when auditor is considering that, he will consider his assessment of risk of material misstatement and whether he is using test of details also or not. ठीक है. So, first of all, auditor will determine as to the suitability of the particular substantive analytical procedure, whether a particular substantive analytical procedure is suitable or not. है ना. ट्रेंड एनालिसिस करना है, बट लास्ट 4-5 years का डेटा है ही नहीं. दिस इज अ न्यू स्टार्टअप, सो इज ट्रेंड एनालिसिस पॉसिबल नहीं. सो पर्टिकुलर सब्सटैंटिव एनालिटिकल प्रोसीजर वेदर इट इज सूटेबल और नॉट, है ना, and he'll consider his risk assessment of risk of material misstatement, ठीक है, and the test of details. So suitability of particular substantive analytical procedure, I gave you example of what? Trend analysis. This is a startup. Trend analysis कर सकते हो? नहीं, last year data are not available, है ना. So suitability of particular substantive analytical procedure, and it depends upon the auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement and whether he is using test of detail or not. ठीक है. So first point, procedure. So evaluate the reliability of data. ठीक है. Just try to understand the sequence of all these 4 steps. ठीक है. So first of all, auditor was determining what? Suitability of a particular substantive analytical procedure, then evaluating the reliability of data on which that particular analytical procedure is to be applied. ठीक है. Now if you remember, I gave you an example कि अगर number of employees is let's say 100 है, and auditor is being told कि the employees are paid salary between 1000 to 1200, so he'll calculate an expectation ना कि अगर इतना आता है salary तो it is fine. So he will see whether an expectation of the recorded amounts can be developed or not in the third step. First step में क्या था कि which particular analytical procedure is what? Suitable. Second में क्या था? On which the data on which that particular analytical procedure is to be applied, whether that is reliable or not. And the third point is what? So third point is what? That whether he's able to develop an expectation sufficiently precise. That whether precise, what is precise? Right. So whether an expectation can be developed rightly or not, he'll consider that. And last point, he will determine that the difference that is acceptable without further investigation. ठीक है. So last is what he will determine that अगर इतना difference है तो that is acceptable to me, but इसके beyond कोई difference है that is not acceptable to me. ठीक है. So for all those who are saying that ma'am video was buffering, I'll be repeating all these 4 points again, so don't worry, you haven't missed any point. ठीक है. So let us start with point number 1, which is what? Suitability. Determine suitability of a particular analytical procedure. ठीक है. So what are we doing? That now auditor has decided that he is applying analytical procedures as substantive test. मतलब under SA 330, when the auditor has to apply the audit procedures. So first is what? In test of control, then is what? Substantive procedures, and we have seen substantive procedures के अंदर auditor applies what? Test of details or substantive analytical procedures. So this auditor has decided कि ठीक है SC 330 में I am performing substantive analytical procedures. ठीक है. So first and foremost, auditor will determine as to which particular analytical procedure is suitable. ठीक है. So students, quickly tell me, is it clear as to what we are studying? Because many of you are saying there was a video lag or the video was buffering. ठीक है. So quickly tell me, is it clear the idea as to what we are studying in this topic? You will not miss anything because I'll be doing all these 4 points in detail now. So first is suitability of particular analytical procedures. So you can understand now that firstly all these 4 points are given in brief here, है ना. यहाँ पे they are given in a line or 2, and then a detailed explanation of each and every point is given. ठीक है. See, when you are applying substantive analytical procedure, first of all, if you remember, we have done. So students are saying that, ma'am, you already covered the script part. ठीक है. So auditor, see this ratio calculation, the trend analysis, it is more applicable when the data is consists of large volume of transactions. and that too predictable. If you remember, I gave you example of building. You cannot say that last year trend was कि एक building था या 10 crores, just predictable over time. And yes, relationship among the data should exist. There should be a relationship between what, for example, if the auditor is calculating wages as a percentage of sale, there is a relationship between wages that it should constitute a certain amount of sales. Okay? So the relationship should exist and it should continue in the absence of what, known conditions to the contrary. Okay? Further, which particular analytical procedure is suitable, it depends upon what, auditor's assessment as to how effective it will be in detecting a misstatement. Auditor will apply his professional judgment as to which analytical procedure will be more effective. Then it says that it might be possible that any unsophisticated predictive model. Now, what is meant by unsophisticated predictive model? Unsophisticated. See, the dictionary meaning of unsophisticated is very simple, which is what? Simple. Predictive is what? Your estimation. Okay? So I can say reasonableness test is unsophisticated predictive model. It is what? It is just number of employees. Example, it is what, number of employees multiplied by salary per employee. So what is giving? It is giving a reasonable amount of salary. So it says that which particular analytical procedure is to be applied, it depends upon auditor's assessment. But at times it often happens that unsophisticated, very simple predictive model, they will give you the correct audit evidence, and further you need not apply test of details here. ठीक है, नंबर ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज इतना है, सैलरी इतना है, तो ठीक है, डिटेल में चेकिंग करने की जरूरत नहीं है, बिकॉज ऑडिटर फाइंड्स दैट दिस इज रीजनेबल इनफ. ठीक है, लेट मी टेक अनदर एग्जांपल ऑफ लेट्स से जीपी रेशियो. See, if the GP ratio is consistent, it does not mean that the auditor will not check the P&L items in detail. It is just supporting the other items that are recorded in the P&L. So once the auditor sees that, okay, GP ratio is consistent with that of the last year, it just shows that the P&L is reasonable. But checking to karna hi padega na. So it simply says that which particular analytical procedure is to be applied. First of all, there should be a volume of transaction, a large volume of transaction, and which should be predictable over time. Okay? Then it says that the relationship among data should exist and continue. Then it says that it depends upon what, auditor's assessment of how effective a particular analytical procedure is. And it often happens that any unsophisticated predictive model, like I gave you example of what, this salary, okay, that it will give you what, convincing audit evidence that ठीक है, इतना audit evidence है, so it is reasonable enough, I need not check this in detail. ठीक है. However, I gave you another example that if let's say GP ratio is okay, it is fine enough, ठीक है, that it is consistent with respect to the prior period data, but still the auditor may feel a need to check the other items of the P&L in detail. ठीक है. So this is what determining the suitability of a particular analytical procedure. And which analytical procedure auditor is going to perform, it depends upon the nature of assertion he needs to check. If you remember, I gave an example that rights and obligations cannot be checked by performing analytical procedure. Uske liye to you will have to check what? You will have to perform test of details. Okay? And further, it says that it depends upon what, risk of material misstatement. Okay? So one example has been given in your module as to where the auditor can use both. Test of detail bhi use kar raha hai, and the auditor can also use what, substantive analytical procedure. Okay? For example, see, if account receivable has to be checked, that is the debtor balance. So auditor may apply analytical procedure to an aging of customer accounts as to aging is what, how old a debtor is. Okay? So uske liye to auditor can apply what, analytical procedure. Okay? But in order to see the recoverability, whether a particular debtor will be recoverable or not, so uske liye to auditor will have to perform what, test of detail. Okay? So auditor may, when he is looking at what, the let's say the valuation of the debtors, he may apply what? Analytical procedures. Okay? That last year percentage of debtors as a percentage to total sales was itna. Okay? So this year itna hai. Okay? But with respect to recoverability, तो उसके लिए तो auditor will have to perform what? Test of detail, that is he will be checking in detail. Okay? So this was about suitability of a particular analytical procedure, whereby we discussed that large volume of transaction होना चाहिए, predictable होना चाहिए, relationship exist करना चाहिए and continue करना चाहिए, and otherwise it depends upon what? Auditor's assessment as to how effective a particular analytical procedure will be in detecting a misstatement. Okay? But it might happen that in some cases, even unsophisticated predictive model may be effective as analytical procedure. I gave you example of what GP ratio है and number of employees wala. This is very beautifully explained in this example. Please read it as a homework. Then it says that, see, if controls over sales order processing are weak, the auditor may place more reliance on test of details rather than only on substantive analytical procedure. Obviously, if internal control are weak, risk of material misstatement is high, auditor will not only apply on performing what? Analytical procedure. That will not provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Us case mein to auditor will have to perform what? Detailed checking. Test of details us case mein to karna hi padega. And here we have understood that particular substantive analytical procedure may also be considered suitable when test of details are performed on the same assertion. Because we have seen that under SA 330, auditor decides as to whether he'll perform what? Only test of details or only substantive analytical procedures or a combination of both. So this example shows that as to how an auditor can use both test of details and substantive analytical procedure. Okay? Clear? Quickly tell me suitability of a particular analytical procedure, whether it is clear or not. Okay? Then I'll be starting with what? Reliability of data, and you will see that we have almost done this topic here also and in chapter number 3 also. So for all those who have done chapter number 3 with me or who have done chapter number 3 on their own or by whatever source, tell me what are the factors on which the reliability of a data depends upon. We have done two things on which the reliability of data is dependent. I need your reply, students. My first query to you was whether you have understood this first point with respect to what? Suitability of particular analytical procedure. And the second is with respect to what? Reliability, what affects the reliability of data. Send in your replies, please. So students are saying it is clear. And abhi tak Tannu has answered me with respect to reliability of data, which is correct. So the second point is what? When the auditor has decided that, okay, I'll be applying this particular substantive analytical procedure. So students, that particular analytical procedure, be it ratio analysis, be it trend analysis, that is to be applied on certain data. So unless and until that data is available, auditor cannot, apply the substantive analytical procedure. So the next point is what? Reliability of data. And if you remember, we have done in chapter number 3, for which I have received reply from Tannu only, that it depends upon the source and nature. Acha, Vikas has also answered. Then Harsh has also answered. Okay. Correctly, that is what? Source and nature. Okay? So the next point is that when the auditor has decided that he'll be applying a particular substantive analytical procedure, he has seen the suitability, then auditor, you need to see the reliability. And the reliability, for considering the reliability, you have to consider what? Source of information. Quickly send me the reply. Which information is more reliable, internal or external? Internal or external? I need your replies. We have already done this in quite detail in chapter number 3. So external is more reliable. Now my next query, when will the internal information be more reliable? So yes, students, one of you have mentioned international. No, the answer is what? External. Okay? So external information is more reliable. Now my next query to you is, when is the internal information more reliable? When is internal information more reliable? Quickly, I need your replies. See, this shows whether you have understood and learned the various topics of chapter number 3. And see, students, how all these topics are interrelated. Your reliability of data wala topic is already covered in chapter number 3. So the reliability of internal data will be more when the controls over preparation of information are good. Okay? So these 2 points relate to what? Source of information. Okay? Then nature and relevance of information and comparability. Okay? So we'll discuss all these 4 points in detail. So we are seeing that when the auditor has decided a particular substantive analytical procedure, so yes, students have correctly answered that when internal controls are strong, when internal controls are effective. Correct. Narayanan, Satya Pratap, and then Chaitanya. You all have answered correctly. So source of information available. So information may be more reliable when it is obtained from what? Independent source. Comparability of the data. See, broad industry data may need to be supplemented to be comparable if the entity is what? Manufacturing, producing, selling specialized product. See, if the data that is available with you, okay, and if the industry data is available with you, okay, but your client is manufacturing certain specialized product, okay, let's say for example, you are conducting the audit of a client which is manufacturing shoe soles, shoe soles, okay. So you have a data of the industry which manufactures shoe soles, but your client is manufacturing shoe soles with certain extra, let's say, medicinal value also, okay. So what does that mean? That your client is manufacturing certain specialized products. So you can compare an apple to an apple. So you will have to supplement that industry data, broad industry data, so as to make it comparable to your client data. So comparable information should also be available. Then only you can apply the particular substantive analytical procedure. Then is nature and relevance of the information available. One of the analytical procedures we have seen is what? Whereby we are comparing what? Actual data with the expectations by the management, that is the budgets. Now students, tell me, budget should be based on what is expected or on the goals to be achieved? See, goals can always be what? Aggressive. You can put a goal that I want to, secure 100 marks in all my 8 papers. That can be a goal. It is, what? Aggressive. But what is expected based on the circumstances is more realistic now. So the budget should be based on what? The expectations, which is more realistic rather than the goals. Because why? Because the goals are what? Aggressive. Goal to company can say that I want to achieve 100 crores ka profit, but based on the circumstances, what is expected should be the budget. So it says nature and relevance of information, whether budgets have been established as a result of a result to be expected rather than goals to be achieved by, because what is expected is more realistic and goals can always be aggressive. Okay? And last is what? Control over the preparation of information. Okay? So if any budgets are being prepared, budgets are what? Internal information. So whether there are controls over preparation, review and maintenance of the budgets. Okay? So with this we have done our second point. Okay? So what we are discussing when the auditor has decided that he'll be using the analytical procedure as substantive test. So first of all, auditor shall determine the suitability of a particular analytical procedure. Then he'll evaluate the reliability of data. Okay? And the third point, reliability of data mein what we have done? The source, the comparability, the nature and what was the last point? Controls. ठीक है, so basically source and control are related, है ना, both are related to what? First says कि external independent is more reliable and it says internal will be more reliable when the controls are effective. ठीक है, so comparability and nature. ठीक है, so the third point. ठीक है, so evaluation of whether the expectation is sufficiently precise, whether you can develop an expectation or not, third auditor will consider that. ठीक है, now whether an expectation can be developed or not, it depends upon further 3 points. ठीक है, students, I hope whatever we have done, whatever we are doing is clear. ठीक है, so the third point is what? Evaluation of whether expectation is sufficiently precise. Whatever expectation you are developing, whether that can be developed sufficiently precisely. What is meant by precisely? I told you, rightly or correctly. ठीक है, again I'll give you the example of building only, or research and expenditure. See, with respect to research and expenditure, you cannot develop an expectation. Na? You can develop an expectation with respect to predictable kind of transactions or account balances like your purchase and sale. Hana? So it depends upon 3 factors, and again you'll see it is a kind of repetition only. ठीक है, so accuracy with which expected result of substantive analytical procedure can be predicted. For example, auditor may expect greater consistency in comparing what? Gross profit margin from one period to another rather than comparing discretionary expenses like research or advertisement. So when the auditor is deciding with respect to a particular analytical procedure, let's say he has decided that he'll apply ratio analysis. Now, which particular ratio analysis? So he cannot apply ratio analysis with respect to research and advertisement. इधर तो auditor को test of details करना ही पड़ेगा, detailed checking करना ही पड़ेगा ना. इधर applying analytical procedure won't be sufficient, है ना. So auditor will see whether expectation can be developed sufficiently precisely. What is precisely? Rightly, accurately, correctly. ठीक है. The degree to which the information can be disaggregated. Let's say the auditor wants to apply, auditor wants to apply the analytical procedure with respect to various segments of the client, but the data is not disaggregated. Last year data is not disaggregated. It is not differentiated. Segment wise data is not available. So can you apply a particular analytical procedure? No. है ना. So the degree to which information is disaggregated, देखो जितना ज्यादा disaggregation होगा, जितना ज्यादा divided होगा information, उतना ज्यादा अच्छे से comparison would be possible ना. Let's say this time you want to compare the wages expense with respect to the last year expenses. ठीक है, let's take an example कि last year का data is not available on the accounts were destroyed by fire. Only you have total expense ka data. So can you compare now? Can you apply analytical procedure? Auditor wanted to see what is the ratio of wages to the total expenses, but this data of the last year is not available. Or let's say this data of the industry is not available. Industry ka you have total expense only. So can you apply? No. So whether an expectation can be sufficiently can be developed sufficiently precisely depends upon what? कि predictability है या नहीं. ठीक है. Then disaggregation है या नहीं. And last but not the least, whether the data, financial as well as non-financial, whether that is available or not. ठीक है. Why? Because analytical procedure लगाना है, data पे लगाना है ना, तो available तो होना चाहिए ना. Non-financial data है ही नहीं आपके पास, number of employees है ही नहीं. ठीक है. In case of let's say your client is having say PGs, है ना, it is giving it on rent. You don't know the number of flats or number of houses that has been given on rent. That data is not available. How will you apply? How will you develop an expectation? ठीक है. So with this we have done third point. So let me just take you back to the point from where we started this topic. So we have done So determining the suitability of analytical procedures we have done. Then we did evaluate reliability of data, and then we saw whether an expectation can be developed. ठीक है. Now last is determining acceptable difference. See, when you are applying reasonableness test, तो वहां क्या कहते हैं, which is fair enough. ठीक है. So you will be considering ना as to, अच्छा अगर इतना difference आया ना तो that is acceptable. I gave you an example कि number of employees 100 है ना, and the management says कि 1000 से 1200 के बीच में salary दिया जाता है. So you say ठीक है, अगर 1,10,000 के आसपास आता है ना, इससे plus 5,000 minus 5,000 आता है, तो that is reasonable. So what are you considering? Amount of difference of recorded amounts. Recorded amounts is what is coming in the financial statement from the expected values. Expected values can be what? My calculation, auditor's calculation, or the budgets. That is acceptable. कि इतना difference तो acceptable है, इस पे I'll not go for further investigation. But हाँ, इसके beyond, if there is any difference, I will have to go for further investigation. That is, I'll have to perform certain test of details or maybe certain detailed checking. ठीक है. So see, the auditor's determination of amount of difference from expectation that is accepted. See, don't get confused between expected and expectation. See what is mentioned here. You have developed an expectation now. So the amount of difference from the expected amount which is acceptable, which the auditor is willing to accept, कि अगर इतना है तो I'll accept, मैं further investigation I'll not go for further investigation. ठीक है. So auditor will determine that. And students, now I need answers from all of you. Tell me, if the risk of material misstatement is high, auditor feels that with respect to wages, there are chances that there can be risk of material misstatement. Fake employees हो सकते हैं. So will the auditor keep this difference low or high? If there is a risk of material misstatement with respect to a particular transaction or account balance, ठीक है? So will the auditor keep this difference as a low difference, very less difference, or it can be high also? So quickly send in your replies as to low or high. Quickly, I need your replies, students. Sandeep, which second point you want me to explain again? In this topic only, please tell me. And meanwhile, students, please answer my query. I'm saying if the risk of material misstatement is high, this difference should be low or high. So yes, no, not many of you has given correctly answer. Please listen to the query again. I'm saying that ठीक है, wages ना 1,10,000 या सैलरी जो भी है 1,10,000 के अराउंड होना चाहिए. इसमें अगर 4,000 प्लस माइनस हो जाता है ना, दैट इज एक्सेप्टेबल. ठीक है. दिस इज माई एक्सपेक्टेशन विच आई हैव डेवलप्ड इन पॉइंट नंबर 3. ठीक है. नाउ आई फील दैट इसके अंदर ना बहुत सारे ना फेक एम्प्लॉइज हो सकते हैं. देयर इज अ रिस्क ऑफ मटीरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट. So will I keep this as 4,000 or will I try to reduce it or will I try to increase it? So I will keep it as very low कि इसमें तो mistake हो, इसमें there is a risk of material misstatement whether on account of fraud or error. So इसमें तो I will not accept इससे ज्यादा difference, है ना? ठीक है. तो students part, he's saying low, Tanu is saying low, then Surbhi is saying low, Bohemia is saying low. ठीक है, ठीक है. So if the risk of material misstatement is high, you are assessing that with respect to a particular class of transaction or account balance, there is a risk of material misstatement whether due to fraud or error. उसमें तो acceptable difference will be very less ना, कि क्योंकि इसके अंदर रिस्क है, मैं आई विल नॉट एक्सेप्ट द डिफरेंस, आई विल नॉट एक्सेप्ट हाई डिफरेंस. ठीक है, और आई विल एक्सेप्ट व्हाट जीरो डिफरेंस की ये तो एकदम करेक्टली आना चाहिए. क्यों? क्योंकि अगर थोड़ा बहुत भी डिफरेंस हुआ इट माइट बी पॉसिबल दैट फेक एम्प्लॉइज का चांसेस आर हाई ना. ठीक है. So with this we have done 4 points, but there was a query of a student with respect to the second point which I'll be repeating again. अच्छा, developing an expectation का second point. ठीक है. So I'll repeat this topic and Sandeep, I'll be repeating this point. So what we have done in this topic, that auditor has decided that he is going to apply substantive analytical procedure. Now what all he shall consider? So he shall consider first of all the suitability of a particular analytical procedure. So for all those who said that there was some video problem, please listen to me again. I'm repeating, I'm revising this topic. So whether a particular analytical procedure is suitable or not. So uske liye auditor will first consider that when he has to apply analytical procedure, the volume of transaction should be large. The data should be predictable. I gave you example of what building. Building पे थोड़ा ना लगा दोगे analytical procedure. Building पे थोड़ी ना आप trend analysis लगा दोगे. Purchases पे, sales पे you can very well apply. ठीक है. Relationship among data should be there. ठीक है, and it depends upon auditor's assessment as to which method is more effective. It might happen कि unsophisticated, see this name, this word, it has a very simple meaning, simple. Predictive is what? Estimation. So simple method, unsophisticated predictive model, it may be effective as analytical procedure, like number of employees multiplied by salary per employee, auditor gets 1 lakh. It tallies with whatever has been mentioned in the financial statement. Auditor says, okay, fine, now I need not do further checking. Okay? However, on the other hand, it might happen that auditor is calculating what? GP ratio. So this GP ratio, if it is consistent with the last year data, it shows that the P&L is reasonable. But auditor may feel that there is a need to perform test of details with respect to the individual items of the P&L account. Okay? And we have seen that if the internal control are weak over the sales order processing, example, this is an example, then auditor will not only rely on performing the substantive analytical procedure, he will also perform what? Test of details. ठीक है. And this is the example which shows that with respect to debtors, अगर उसका auditor has to check the aging, he may apply what? Analytical procedure. But with respect to recoverability, उसके लिए तो cash receipts को अच्छे से check करना पड़ेगा ना. ठीक है. Reliability of data depends upon source of information, comparability of information. I told you apple to an apple ना. अगर broad industry data है उसको supplement करना पड़ेगा in order to make it comparable. Nature and relevance. Here we discuss about budgets. Budget should be what is expected, not what is the goal, because goals can always be aggressive, but expectations are realistic now. Controls over the preparation of information. Okay. Then we did the third point, where is Sandeep, now your doubt will be clear. So it says whether you can develop an expectation which is sufficiently precise. कि develop भी कर सकते हो नहीं. For example, first point is what? कि the account balance should be what? Predictable ना. Research expenditure पे थोड़ी ना develop कर पाओगे expectation, but purchases, sales पे you can. ठीक है. Second, data should be disaggregated. If divided data is not available, you want to check the wages. ठीक है. You want to see the trend analysis, or let's say you want to compare the wages which has been incurred by your client with respect to the wages which has been incurred by the companies in the similar industry. But that data is not available. You have the total expense ka amount. Individual bifurcation is not available. Another example, you want to compare the segment wise information, उसके ऊपर ratio analysis लगाना है. But if last year segment wise information is not available, you cannot compare the ratio analysis of the segments this year and the last year. So whether the data is disaggregated, that is divided है भी या नहीं, because जितना ज़्यादा divided होगा ना, उतना ज़्यादा आप expectation अच्छे से develop कर सकते हो with respect to a particular assertion. And the last one is availability of data, financial as well as non-financial data. Then you will see what is the difference of acceptable, what is the difference which is acceptable. ठीक है, जिसके लिए you will not perform what? Further investigation. And then we saw that if the assessed risk that is the risk of material misstatement increases, the amount of difference considered acceptable without investigation decreases in order to achieve the desired level of persuasive evidence. What is persuasive? Convincing evidence. ठीक है, so उसमें तो ऑडिटर अगर और देखो ना, अगर किसी चीज में आपको लगता है कि रिस्क ज्यादा है तो उसमें आप डिफरेंस थोड़ी ना एक्सेप्ट कर लोगे. यू विल ऑलवेज से कि इसमें तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होनी चाहिए भाई, बिकॉज देयर इज अ रिस्क ऑफ मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट हियर. तो उसमें तो द व्हाट डिजायर्ड लेवल योर difference which is acceptable will reduce, and this is very very important. True false के लिए भी, MCQs के लिए भी, descriptive के लिए भी. And I can see that many of you were confused before replying. Now you are saying that you have understood, but since students do get confused on in this point, ठीक है. So simple सी चीज क्या है, जहां ज्यादा मटेरियल है, कुछ जहां रिस्क ऑफ मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट ज्यादा है, वहां पे तो you will not accept more difference ना. उधर तो सब कुछ शुड बी करेक्ट ना, तो उधर यू विल परफॉर्म व्हाट, यू विल नॉट एक्सेप्ट मोर डिफरेंस. ठीक है. नाउ द नेक्स्ट टॉपिक विच सेज, नाउ इफ यू फाइंड दैट देयर आर व्हाट फ्लक्चुएशंस, there are fluctuations which are not acceptable, then what the auditor has to do? Will he ignore it? Acceptable तो है नहीं, तो क्या करना है, ऑडिट करना बंद कर दें या ऑडिट रिपोर्ट में लिख दें? नहीं. वी हैव ऑलवेज सीन दैट वी विल नॉट जस्ट जंप ऑन टू आवर ऑडिट रिपोर्ट, है ना. पहले वी विल परफॉर्म सर्टन व्हाट एडिशनल प्रोसीजर्स. ठीक है, उसको कंफर्म तो कर लो कि वो जो इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग रिजल्ट्स आपके आए हैं, जो आइडेंटिफाइड फ्लक्चुएशंस आए हैं, whether these are acceptable or not. ठीक है, और नहीं है तो क्या करना है. ठीक है, let me just take you to the definition of analytical procedure. When we did analytical procedure की definition ना, we saw that analytical procedure, ठीक है, analytical procedure also encompass such investigation as is necessary of identified fluctuation. Now the topic is such investigation. क्या करना है अब? Now there is identified fluctuation, inconsistent relationship है, difference between the expected and the actual result by a significant amount है. तो what is that such investigation? ठीक है, so see how the topics are related na, है ना. So you need to read between the lines, you need to read each and every line. So our next topic is investigating the results of analytical procedure. If analytical procedures performed in accordance with SA 520 identify fluctuations or relationships that are inconsistent with other relevant information or that differ from expected values by a significant amount as it is. This is the same thing which is mentioned in the definition of analytical procedure ना. तो तब क्या करना है? The auditor shall investigate such differences by, है ना. Can you see the link? क्या करोगे? सिंपल सा है, बताओ क्या करोगे? Quickly tell me. Identified fluctuations आ गए हैं and or that is not acceptable. ठीक है, तो सबसे पहले क्या करोगे? Quickly, I need your replies. Quickly send in your replies. Sandeep, I hope your doubt is now clear with respect to second point of developing an expectation. So the next topic is investigating the results of analytical procedures. Now identified fluctuations are there, inconsistent relationship are there. For example, कि wages जो अभी तक लास्ट ईयर का ट्रेंड क्या था, 10% ऑफ द सेल्स था ना, दिस ईयर देयर हैज बीन समथिंग अनयूजुअल. ठीक है. Yes, Sandeep, Charu and Khushi have answered correctly that you will what? You will first of all inquire management. Management से पूछोगे ना, management tell me why there has been an unusual increase. हो सकता है ना management may give you certain valid reasons, है ना. So inquire management and whatever is the management response, ऐसे मान लेना है क्या उसके ऊपर? नहीं, उसके लिए ऑब्टेन एन ऑडिट एविडेंस ना with respect to this response, उसको you will not just rely upon management response, you will what? You will obtain an audit evidence with respect to this response. So first point is, when there are identified fluctuations, inconsistent relationship, or when there is a difference with the expected results by a significant amount, auditor will inquire the management, है ना, and obtain appropriate audit evidence with respect to the responses. सीधा मान थोड़ी ना लोगे, appropriate audit evidence लोगे ना. Second, if management is not giving you response, or the response that management gave you is not adequate, तो क्या करना है? Perform other procedures, other audit procedures. See, other audit procedures, what will it include? See, it depends upon auditor's judgment na. Other procedures, audit procedures. So it depends upon auditor's professional judgment ना, कि management से भी पूछ लिया है ना. If they give satisfactory reply, तो उसका क्या करना है? You need to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence with respect to that. If you are satisfied, then it is okay. ठीक है. If management doesn't reply, management says I don't know, 10% से 20% increase हुआ है, data is in front of you, you yourself analyze ना. Or whatever reasoning management has given, you are not finding it adequate. So perform other audit procedure as you consider necessary, be it performing additional procedures. And if you are unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, or you conclude that something is wrong, then the auditor always have is what? Audit report. Okay? That is why it is mentioned what? Perform other audit procedure. Okay? So I hope this topic is clear. Investigating results of analytical procedure. Okay? So let me just have a look at the queries. If any one of you has sent. Shubhansh, you are correct. Discuss with management about identified fluctuations, which is absolutely correct. Okay? So I hope your this topic is clear. So here I'll do one thing, students. Here I'll take a break of 10 minutes. 10 minutes. ठीक है? उसके बाद we'll be discussing the rest topics which are left, and then we'll be I'll be discussing with you all the MCQs, descriptive question and case scenario. So I'll suggest one thing to you people. In the break, do one thing, download all those MCQs and case scenario and try to, solve them. This will give you confidence about your understanding. Okay? So we will take a quick break of 10 minutes here, and we'll be meeting after the break. So students, I hope you all are back after the break. And Charu, you are saying to address your query, but what query? I cannot see your query as such. So please send your query again, Charu. So last two topics of this chapter are left. Then we'll be quickly revising this chapter. And thereafter we'll be discussing the questions. Okay? So if you remember, we did that analytical procedures can be applied at the planning phase, at the testing phase, and at the completion phase. Okay? Planning phase we have done, testing phase we have done, and completion phase we have done. And students, please note that analytical procedure assisting forming the overall conclusion, that is what at the completion phase, it is discussed in detail in your final level. Okay? So for the purpose of this chapter, this paper, please try to understand that, see, whatever analytical procedure auditor has performed during the planning phase or testing phase, now when he is drawing the conclusion on the financial statement as a whole, he's drawing what overall conclusion, he will be using the results of all those analytical procedures. Okay? And it says that suppose auditor assess the risk of material misstatement under SA 315, and now when auditor performed the analytical procedure at the testing phase, he found that there is a risk of material misstatement, which earlier when he assessed the risk of material misstatement under SA 315, he did not assess at that time. So what has to be done is, based on the results of analytical procedure, auditor will revise his assessment of risk of material misstatement, which he has done in SA 315. So it basically says that the results of the analytical procedure during the planning phase, testing phase on the individual components, that is now going to help the auditor at the completion phase when he is forming an overall conclusion. And it also says that if any new risk, if he identifies any new risk by applying analytical procedure, the auditor will simply revise his assessment of risk of material misstatement, which he did under SA 315. So as such, in detail, you will be covering the conclusion stage in your final exam. Okay? That is the audit subject at your final levels. Okay? So the last topic of this chapter, which is what? Considerations specific to public sector entities. See, it's basically want to say that when an auditor is applying the analytical procedure, when he's considering as to whether a particular analytical procedure is suitable for a public sector entity, let's say Indian Railways. So what all considerations the auditor has to keep in mind? Okay? So analytical procedure, yes, they can be applied in case of public sector entities, but the auditor need to keep certain things in mind. Basically, it says that there are certain characteristics of the public sector entities that you need to apply. Okay? You need to consider. So students, tell me, can I say that the relationship which is there in the financial statement items with respect to traditional entities, that is the, let's say, the profit-making entities, that is not found in case of government or non-business public sector entities? Why? See, the traditional entities, the profit-making organizations, their motive is what? To earn profit. But public sector entities, their motive is what? To do something for what? Public welfare. Okay? So can I say that in many public sector entities, there may be little direct relationship between revenue and expenditure. See, let's take an example of Indian Railways. Okay? And compare it with the, let's say, a profit-making organization. First of all, let us take an example of profit-making organization. Okay? A profit-making organization hai. See, if the sales are increasing, there will be an increase in what? Profits. Okay? If the profits are less, tell me, when there is recession in the market, all the profit-making organizations or all, which are non-public sector entities, they go for retrenchment of employees now. However, in case of public sector entities, there is no retrenchment. Hana, why? Because irrespective of the profit of or irrespective of the earning of the public sector entity, see, they have to pay to their salaries ना. Pensions जो देने हैं वो तो देंगे ही ना, है ना. जो भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में सैलरीज एम्प्लॉयज को जा रहे हैं वो तो पब्लिक सेक्टर में जाते ही है ना, बिकॉज देयर इज नो रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द रेवेन्यू और द एक्सपेंडिचर. इन केस ऑफ अ पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटिटी, एवरीथिंग, take an example of Indian Railways, the tickets are provided at a subsidized rate. 75% subsidized rate पे मिलता है आपको. So can you say there is a relationship between the revenue and the expenditure? Expenditure तो उतना हो ही रहा है ना, but revenue तो उतना नहीं आता ना, है ना. Another example that I gave you, that in public sector recession है, जो आपके public companies होते हैं वहां रिटेंचमेंट नहीं होता ना. दे कीप ऑन एम्प्लॉइंग द स्टाफ ना, उनको उतना ही सैलरी मिलता है ना, बेशक रिट्रेंचमेंट हो. लेकिन प्राइवेट सेक्टर में वहां पे तो वहां पे देयर आर रिट्रेंचमेंट्स. ठीक है. व्हाई? बिकॉज पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटरप्राइजेस आर विद द मोटिव ऑफ व्हाट? पब्लिक वेलफेयर, है ना. आई गेव यू एग्जांपल ऑफ इंडियन रेलवे, 75% सब्सिडाइज्ड रेट है, तो रेवेन्यू को एक्सपेंडिचर से कैसे कंपेयर करोगे? एक्सपेंडिचर तो हो ही रहा है ना, but revenue generated is very less. You cannot say कि इतना revenue हो रहा है तो इतना expenditure हो रहा है, नहीं, because this revenue is at a very subsidized rate, है ना. So it basically says that auditor, when you have to apply the analytical procedures with respect to public sector entities, let's say Indian Railways, then keep certain things in mind. What are those considerations? That the relationship जो ट्रेडिशनली लाइक जो नॉर्मली आपके क्लाइंट्स के साथ होता है विद द फाइनेंशियल आइटम्स दैट आर अपेयरिंग इन योर business entities, that is not there with respect to what? Public sector entities or government entities. ठीक है. In many public sector entities, there may be little direct relationship between revenue and expenditure. I gave you example of Indian Railways. The tickets are provided at a very subsidized rate. So how can you say that there is a relationship between the revenue and the expenditure? Expenditure जो होता है वो तो होता ही है. Revenue उतना generate नहीं होता ना, because it is provided at subsidized rate. Why? Because the motive is what? The public welfare. Right? And it also happens that in case of public sector entities, the acquisition of asset are not capitalized. They may be it might happen that the asset, the inventories have been purchased, but they have been straightaway used for public welfare. As such, that entity is not deriving any benefit from those assets or from those inventories. And last but not the least, consider the example of Indian Railways. The comparable data is not available. Hana? So in that case, it says auditor, in such a case, since there is a difference between the traditional entities, business entities for which you are conducting the audit, for which you are applying analytical procedures. So when you are applying analytical procedure with respect to public sector entities, जो कि traditional business entity की तरह नहीं होते, जिसमें रेवेन्यू और एक्सपेंडिचर के बीच में रिलेशनशिप एज सच नहीं होता, जिसमें कैपिटल एसेट्स और इन्वेंट्रीज आर नॉट कैपिटलाइज्ड या एसेट्स एंड इन्वेंट्रीज आर नॉट कैपिटलाइज्ड, जिसमें कंपेरेबल डेटा मोस्टली नहीं होता, तो उसमें क्या कंपैरिजन यू कैन डू? इट सेज दैट अदर रिलेशनशिप दैट मे बी रेलेवेंट इन दिस केस आर वेरिएशन इन कॉस्ट पर किलोमीटर ऑफ रोड कंस्ट्रक्शन, कि रोड कंस्ट्रक्शन पर किलोमीटर कॉस्ट लास्ट ईयर कितना था और इस ईयर कितना था, है ना. You can consider that calculation. Or number of vehicles acquired compared to number of vehicles retired. If there are public vehicles like your DTC, your buses are there, है ना. So you may compare कि last year कितना buses जो था acquired, new buses were acquired vis-a-vis as a comparison to how many buses were retired, that is they were scrapped off, है ना. So these type of comparisons can be done, but the comparisons, that the ratio analysis, the analytical procedures that you apply with respect to traditional business entities, that may not be applicable in respect of public sector entities. Why? Let's say you in respect of business entity, you compare the data with the industry. Indian Railway के case में can you compare the data with the industry? No, Indian Railway is a monopoly in itself. There is no comparable data. है ना. Revenue expenditure में as such there is no relationship. Why? Because revenue of all these public sector entities, this is at a very subsidized rate. Na? The tickets are provided at a very subsidized rates because the motive is what? Public welfare. है ना. So for that reason the auditor needs to consider all, the auditor can consider comparisons like this. ठीक है. So where is it given? It is given in SA 520 itself. ठीक है. So IR से I mean Indian Railways. Parth Shah, Indian Railways. I gave you an example. I'm not talking about any ratio here, है ना. Railways. So this is what example. ठीक है. So clear. So with this we have finished our chapter number 8, which is analytical procedures. I'll quickly do one thing. I'll revise this entire chapter. It will take another 7-8 minutes, and then we will quickly do all the questions that I have shared. I expect that you all have downloaded the questions, have uploaded them today itself. ठीक है. So we have seen that routine check से disclose नहीं हो सकता. What mistakes and manipulation? So auditor को क्या करना पड़ेगा? Comparison, trend analysis, ratio analysis and reasonableness test. इसको क्या बोलते हैं? Overall test. और ये कहाँ पे दिया गया है? SA 520. ठीक है. So it says what? Now try to recapitulate the definitions in your mind. है ना. Evaluation of financial information through analysis of any relationship, nahi. Plausible relationship among only financial data, nahi. Among both financial and non-financial data. Or itna hi hai, nahi. It also encompass such investigation, and now you all know which investigation, as is necessary of identified fluctuation or relationship that are inconsistent with other relevant information or that differ from expected values by a significant amount. ठीक है. If you are comparing, it can be with prior period, budgets, forecast prepared by management or expectation of auditor. You can compare it with industry information also. ठीक है. And relationship can be what? Among elements of financial information or among what? Financial information and relevant non-financial information. ठीक है. So it says that 520 deals with what? Auditor's use of analytical procedure as substantive procedure. So I can say at the testing phase, and as procedure near the end of audit that assists the auditor when forming an overall conclusion. So I can say completion phase. The use of analytical procedure as risk assessment procedure is dealt in SA 315. That is, I can say planning phase. So what is the objective? So I've told you कि 500 series का essay है, तो the one of the audit objective will be what? In order to obtain the audit evidence. So to obtain relevant, reliable audit evidence when auditor is performing what? The substantive analytical procedures, and to design and perform an analytical procedure at near the end of the audit. Why? It will assist the auditor when forming an overall conclusion. What assistance? As to whether the financial statement are consistent with auditor's understanding of the entity. At the risk assessment procedure planning phase में ही auditors thought that, or testing phase में auditor thought that the GP ratio should be somewhere around 14 to 16%. Now when he's concluding, he's drawing an overall conclusion, he'll see whether it is actually, whether the financial statements are actually consistent with his understanding. ठीक है. So purpose we have seen that it is to assess whether balances and data appear reasonable. है ना. So it will give a trigger point, that is, it is an attention directing process for an auditor. That unusual state of affairs तो नहीं है, mistakes तो नहीं है, and all these examples you have already discussed, you can just have them, give them a read. See, one point is left, that these analysis can be, these tests can be interfirm or intrafirm. So what is interfirm and intrafirm? Interfirm is what? When I am comparing my client's data with the industry data. Intra-firm is what? Within the firm. That is, let's say I'm comparing the data with the subsidiary, or let's say with the various segments. है ना? So intra-firm and inter-firm. ठीक है? So if something is material, auditor will see whether it is manipulated or not. है ना? And this paragraph whereby it says that analytical procedure helps to identify unusual transactions, events, amounts, ratios, trends that may indicate that they have audit implications. And if anything like that is identified, it will help the auditor in identifying risk of material misstatement, especially the risk of material misstatement due to what? Fraud. ठीक है. Timing, an experienced auditor uses it at only planning stage. No, this is false. At planning phase, testing phase and completion phase. Planning phase में क्यों करना है? See how to learn ना, just pick up the keywords. That understanding the client business, ठीक है. Identifying the areas of potential risk, ठीक है. NTE of other audit procedures हो जाएगा, and auditor will use what? Financial and non-financial data here, ठीक है. I gave you example of wages की specific account balance का NTE कैसे decide करना है. It will depend upon what? Analytical procedure that he will apply for the wages. Substantive analytical procedure. So it says that when the auditor is deciding as to whether at the assertion level to apply test of detail or substantive analytical procedures or both, auditor will consider all these factors. Availability of data, data available होगा reliable and relevant, तभी तो लगेगा ना analytical procedure. Disaggregation, data जब disaggregated होगा तभी तो आप अच्छे से उसका comparison कर सकते हो ना. So disaggregation is what? Dividing the data. टोटल एक्सपेंस है, vis-a-vis you have the total of all the expenses. तो कौन सा बेटर है कंपैरिजन के लिए? सेकंड वाला सिचुएशन है where you have the bifurcation of the expenses also. Account type, for example certain account types are predictable, है ना, and balance sheet items जो होते हैं they are not predictable. I gave you example of building में तो नहीं बोलोगे ना कि लास्ट टाइम इतनी थी इस टाइम इतना होना चाहिए, बट हाँ परचेजेस में you can always say. Source is what? There are certain predictable transactions which are large number, numerous होता है, similar होता है, routine nature के होता है, purchases and sales. However, there are certain significant class of transactions caught. Significant is this significant class of transactions which are what? Important, but they are not repetitive in nature. तो उसके लिए तो since they are based on management judgment, test of details ही करना पड़ेगा, ठीक है. Then predictability, that is the relationship. The account balance is what? Predictable, है ना. For example, your sales and cash receipts, your trade debtors and cash receipts के बीच में, your sales and cost of sales के बीच में, ठीक है. Nature of assertion, we took example of rights and obligations. Rights and obligations के लिए तो you will have to check what? The title deed, the let's say the electricity bill, है ना. But measurement, completeness, valuation के लिए you can apply analytical procedure. Inherent risk, if risk of material misstatement is high, obviously the auditor will not only apply what? Analytical procedures, he will go for test of details also. Very important from the point of view of MCQ, true, false or descriptive. What are the techniques? The techniques are what? Trend analysis, ratio analysis, reasonableness test and structure modeling. Trend analysis commonly used technique है. Data प्रायर पीरियड से कंपेयर होता है या टू और मोर प्रायर पीरियड से कंपेयर होता है. कोई चेंजेस है तो उसको अंडरस्टैंड करना है, व्हाट आर द फैक्टर्स. सो ऑडिटर क्या करता है? ही इज एनालाइजिंग अकाउंट फ्लक्चुएशंस. कैसे? बाय कंपेयरिंग द करंट डेटा विद द प्रीवियस ईयर या सेवरल ईयर्स का. फॉर एग्जांपल अनयूजुअल इंक्रीज इन सैलरी है तो ऑडिटर विल सी कि व्हाट इज द रीजन. रेशियो एनालिसिस, एसेट लायबिलिटी इनकम एक्सपेंस सबके लिए आप रेशियो एनालिसिस अप्लाई कर सकते हो, बट देयर शुड बी अ रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द डेटा, है ना. And you can compare it with prior period or with the industry. Reasonableness test, unlike trend analysis, analytical procedure, this analytical procedure does not use what? Does not rely on events of prior period. Unlike trend analysis, मतलब trend analysis तो रिलाई करता है ना पुराने सालों पे उसके डेटा पे, बट रीजनेबलनेस टेस्ट में वो नहीं चाहिए होता. क्या चाहिए होता है? नॉन फाइनेंशियल डेटा, है ना. सो दीज आर द वेरियस एग्जांपल की नंबर ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज या इंटरेस्ट एक्सपेंस. स्ट्रक्चर मॉडलिंग एक मॉडलिंग टूल है, दैट इज अ स्टैटिस्टिकल मॉडल जो कि क्या यूज करता है? फाइनेंशियल एंड नॉन फाइनेंशियल डेटा. किसका? लास्ट ईयर का. Why? In order to predict the current account balances. Example, linear regression. ठीक है. Now, when the auditor has decided that he'll be applying analytical procedures, see whether with test of detail or individually, we are not talking about that. We are saying that अब analytical procedure तो apply हो रहे हैं, तो अब सबसे पहले क्या देखना है? Suitability of a particular substantive analytical procedure, जो risk of material misstatement and what test of detail he is performing पे depend करता है. Reliability of data देखना है, develop करना है, expectation और difference देखना है कि which is acceptable without further investigation. So when you are looking at a suitability of particular analytical procedure, See, students are saying, ma'am, we can see certain common factors जो ऊपर भी आए हैं, यहाँ पे आए हैं. See, if something is common, this is very easy ना. You can just learn at once and it will help you twice, है ना. Further, since we are talking about analytical procedures only, ऊपर क्या है कि analytical procedure करना है या नहीं, तो उसके लिए जो factors. फिर है ये particular वाला analytical procedure करना है नहीं, तो कुछ factors तो common आएंगे ना, है ना. So substantive analytical procedure apply का होंगे large volume ट्रांजैक्शन पे विच आर प्रिडिक्टेबल इन नेचर, रिलेशनशिप होना चाहिए. ऑडिटर के असेसमेंट पे डिपेंड करता है, बट अनसोफिस्टिकेटेड प्रिडिक्टिव मॉडल भी कभी कभी इफेक्टिव हो जाते हैं. द एग्जांपल इज गिवन हियर. ठीक है. Another thing is, if the internal controls are on any, here the example of sales order processing is given, if these are weak, so auditor will not rely only on substantive analytical procedure, he will place more reliance on what test of details. A very important point from the point of view of your MCQs. I've given MCQ on this. Okay. So it says how test of details and substantive analytical procedure can be used to check two assertions with respect to a particular point. Reliability के लिए source देखना है. Source मतलब independent is more reliable, लेकिन internal कब है? When controls over preparation are good. Comparability, it should be what? Comparable होना चाहिए. Broad industry data है तो उसको supplement करो in order to make that comparable. Nature and relevance में we saw the example of budgets. That budget should be based on what? Expectation, not the goal. Why? Because the goals are aggressive. ठीक है. Budgets are more realistic. So evaluation, whether you can develop an expectation sufficiently precisely, that is correctly, आ भी सकता है नहीं. तो first of all जिस matter को check करना है वो predictable होना चाहिए ना. Research and expenditure या advertisement को you cannot predict, है ना. Degree to which data is disaggregated and availability of financial and non-financial data. Difference है तो what is the amount of difference that is acceptable without any further investigation. And we saw material है या if risk of material misstatement is high, obviously we are going to reduce the acceptable difference. Investigate करना है, हाँ करना है. Why? Because ऐसे 520 में definition में भी starting में mention था as investigation as is necessary, such investigation as is necessary. So inquire करो मैनेजमेंट, जो भी मैनेजमेंट ने रिस्पॉन्स दिया है उसको क्या करो, ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन करो या अदर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर करो. अगर इन दोनों में से कुछ नहीं होता है, ओवरऑल कंक्लूजन में हेल्प करेगा. एंड पब्लिक सेक्टर में सी देयर आर 4 पॉइंट्स. क्या क्या है? इट सेज पहला वाला पॉइंट क्या है कि जो ट्रेडिशनल एंटिटीज, बिजनेस एंटिटीज में रिलेशनशिप होता है वो पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटिटीज में नहीं होता है. फॉर एग्जांपल रेवेन्यू और एक्सपेंडिचर में रिलेशनशिप नहीं होता है. ठीक है. देन वी सॉ दैट एक्विजिशन ऑफ एसेट्स, ये सब कैपिटलाइज हो सकता है ना हो, acquisition of assets या inventories. And then we saw that comparable data is not available. So auditor क्या कर सकता है? Auditor can use what? Cost per kilometer of road construction या number of vehicles acquired compared to number of vehicles retired. ठीक है. So with this we have finished our chapter number 8. Quickly please go through the case scenario, and for all those who are saying that they are unable to what? Upload the download the notes. Students, please try to download them again, because many of your friends have already downloaded the notes, है ना. So as such there is no problem, I suppose. Meanwhile, please read this for all those who are not able to download the notes. Students, quickly read. So Charu, with respect to your query now, see, as sir has also told you that every subject has a required language, so that is to be mentioned. So I always tell you to pick the keywords, है ना. So those keywords you will have to write, and the connecting words you can always use your own language. ठीक है. So now MNO Limited is a company engaged in business of manufacture of, what is this, washing machines. Ramsham are the auditors. they are conducting the audit. During the year, the engagement partner, Mr. CA Ram, decided to use analytical procedures. Okay. At the time of planning, CA Ram discussed with his team regarding the various analytical procedures. The audit team started with the audit of direct income by comparing the current year direct figure with corresponding figures of earlier 3 years. So quickly tell me, what is this? Further, with respect to checking of wages paid to the factory workers, the audit team has been advised to use reasonableness test. While checking sales transactions, the engagement team found that the controls over sales order processing are weak. Okay? So Parth has already started answering, and his answer is correct with respect to first point. So students, please send in your replies with respect to point number 1. While conducting the audit of direct income of MNO, which technique is used by the engagement team as substantive analytical procedure? Send in your replies. So the answer is what? Trend analysis. ठीक है, क्योंकि क्या लिखा हुआ है ऊपर देखो, that with respect to direct income by comparing the direct current year direct income with corresponding figures of earlier 3 years. तो ये क्या हो रहा है? ट्रेंड एनालिसिस. रेशियो तो है ही नहीं, रीजनेबलनेस टेस्ट भी नहीं, स्ट्रक्चर मॉडलिंग भी नहीं है. ठीक है. So many of you have answered correctly. Vrinda, please check your answer. With this, which of the following, now I always tell you, please read the question correctly. Which of the following is not correct with respect to reasonableness test to be conducted with respect to what? Wages. So which is not correct? Reasonableness tests are generally more applicable to income statement. ये तो ठीक लग रहा है. Like trend analysis, reasonableness tests rely on the events of prior period. ये ठीक नहीं लग रहा. Reasonableness test uses non-financial data. ये भी ठीक लग रहा है. So the answer is what? Which of the following is not correct? So the answer is what? B. है ना? Don't get confused. Read the question properly. ठीक है? Now, question 3. Analytical procedures are more useful while conducting. Just a minute. While conducting the audit and at the completion phase, but are of no use at the planning phase. Quickly tell me. Statement 2. In planning stage of audit procedures, audit procedures assist the auditor in understanding the client's business and identifying the areas of potential risk. So answer to third should be. Quickly send in your replies. And Charu, your answer with respect to question number 1 is correct. Rohan, your answer for second is correct. Khushi, first answer is correct. Parth, your answer with respect to third is correct. Rohan, your answer is also correct with respect to third. Jameel, Shubhank, your answers are also correct. So students, please, rest of the students send in your replies with respect to third question. And those who have done third may go for fourth and fifth. So the which statement is correct? No, it is not mentioned which statement is correct, but 2 statements are given, then it has given options. So only statement number 2 is correct. Why? Because planning stage maybe analytical procedures are useful. So Shubhank, your answer is correct. Sandeep, please check your answer to question number 3. Fourth, with respect to weak controls over sales order processing, what is the responsibility of CA Ram as the statutory auditor of MNO? So weak controls over sales order processing. Remember, I told you that I have given you this question in MCQ. So read with me. So it says that the internal controls with respect to sales order processing are weak. ठीक है, तो उसमें उसको क्या करना है ऑडिटर को? CA Ram should consider performing test of details rather than relying on substantive analytical procedure for assertion relating to receivable. ये वैसे ठीक लग रहा है, but let's see the other options also. CA Ram as the statutory auditor has no responsibility with respect to weakness in the controls over sales order processing. This is wrong. ठीक है, you have already done chapter number 4, है ना? CA Ram should mention the fact regarding the weak controls over the sales order processing in his report. No. CA Ram can apply either substantive analytical procedure or perform test of details for checking sales order processing and weak control over sales order processing has no influence over such decision? No. So the answer is what? A. And Shubhank has answered it correctly. Okay. And last question is going to be very simple. Which standard on auditing has to be applied by Messrs. Ram, Sham and Associates while applying the analytical procedure? So the answer is B. Okay. So many of you have given, in fact, most of you have given correct answer. Okay. Now let us go to the MCQs. I am now on MCQ, so send in your replies like one and which is the correct answer. As per standard on auditing, the term analytical procedure means evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship among financial data only. Students, quickly send in your replies. We will be discussing descriptive questions also after this. Reply to MCQ question number 1. So, this only word is wrong here. Financial data as well as non-financial data, remember? So, this statement is not correct then. And see, which of the following is correct? Read the question properly, students. So, statement 2, auditor can depend on routine checkings to disclose all the mistakes, manipulations that may exist, which is also what? Incorrect. So the answer is D. Okay. So which of the following is correct here? So none of the statement is correct. Statement 1 भी ठीक नहीं है, B भी ठीक नहीं है, दोनों ही ठीक नहीं है. ठीक है? I hope this is clear. When the controls over sales order processing are weak, this is again a repetition of the question that we did in case scenario, but there is a purpose behind repeating this because this is very important. The auditor may put more reliance on substantive analytical procedure related to receivable. No. The auditor may place more reliance on test or details rather than substantive, and this is appearing to be correct. The auditor should not place reliance on test or detail and none of the above. So the answer is what? B. So Shubhank, Charu, Pooja, you have answered it correctly. And Riya. Send in your reply with respect to third. Which of the following statement is correct? Statement 1, statement 2. Ratio analysis is useful in analyzing revenue expense account only. So students, I need answers from maximum of you. So Parth has answered correctly with respect to third question. Charu, you have also answered correctly. Shubhank, you are also right. Pooja, you are also right. I need answers from others also. Surbhi, Aditya, Khushi, please send in your replies. So the answer to question number 3 is what? None of the statement is correct because reasonableness test does not rely on what? Prior period. Rather than they rely on what is used in reasonableness test. Quickly send in your reply. I'm saying reasonableness test uses what? So who is asking with respect to Sushil? With respect to case scenario 4th, the correct answer is A. So the correct answer is A. With respect to, I'm saying case scenario. Okay. Now, third has, I've asked a query here. I've asked a question here that tell me reasonableness test uses what? They do not rely on the prior period information. Then uses what? They uses what? Yes, non-financial data. Okay. Now, with respect to fourth question, which of the following is not an analytical procedure? Apply your minds, apply whatever we have discussed is not an analytical procedure. See, comparing aggregate of administrative expenses with the previous year corresponding figures. Comparing, so इसका मतलब ये तो है analytical procedure, ठीक है? Comparing actual cost with budgeted cost, since it is what comparing, तो ये भी लग रहा है analytical procedure. Tracing sales entered in the sales book to invoices. This is a part of test of detail, na? So this is not analytical procedure. Comparing GP ratio of current year with GP ratio of previous years, ये भी analytical procedure है. So which of the following is not? Fourth answer is what? C. And Chaitanya, Sandeep, Tannu, Harsh, you all are correct. Riya, check your answer with respect to fourth. Parth, you are correct. Shubhang, Pooja, all are correct. Okay. Now the last question. Analytical procedures can be performed in planning phase of audit, during the testing phase of audit, during the completion phase of audit, during all three phases. So the answer to this question is, quickly send in your replies with respect to fifth. I can see some replies have already come. Pooja, check your Pooja, check your answer with respect to fifth question. The easiest question. And Rupesh, what do you want me to clarify? You have just mentioned clarify. So yes, Khushi, Satya, Charu, Riya, Harsh, Pooja, Vikas, Tannu, Sandeep, Parth, Surbhi, you all have answered correctly. Chaitanya, okay? So this was with respect to what? Your MCQs, okay? And students, before going on to the descriptive question, one thing I would like to repeat here is that CA Rajesh Sachdeva sir asked you to learn the definitions. So I hope you all have already started to learn the definitions, okay? Further, he asked you to learn 3 questions daily. So please, if you haven't started, start this exercise from this chapter only. Okay? Hardly there are 10 topics. You can do, and all these 10 topics are not, very difficult, and they are very small. So you can pick up just 4 or 5 topics a day, and you can just finish up this chapter in the next 2 or 3 days only. Okay? So please start this exercise if you haven't already started. So sir will be coming in the next session and he'll be asking you all as to whether you have started those strategies or not. So my advice to you is, please start learning. Okay? Now, I hope you... I hope you all are clear about the MCQs and the case scenario. Okay? Now, descriptive questions. So what are the objectives of the auditor as per SA 520 analytical procedure? So quickly send in your replies 1 and 2. There are 2 objectives. Quickly send in. See, I'm not asking you to send the exact language or the entire language, but you can just, put the keywords in your replies so that I'm able to understand your level of understanding. So Vikas is saying he has learned 5 definitions. He has started learning 5 definitions daily. Parth is also saying so. See, Parth, if you are clear with all the concepts, now you will find the questions easy. Okay? I can see many of you are still, giving incorrect answer with respect to 1 or 2 MCQs. So that means something you need to, read from the modules. Okay? So Parth got the answer to your query. If you have read each and every line, you are clear with all the concepts, you have read the entire module and you have started learning, you are obviously going to find everything very easy. Okay, so Tanu is saying one of the evidences to obtain relevant, reliable audit evidence. Okay, and what is the second? That near the end of the audit, to design and perform the analytical procedure. So let me just take you through the chapter. So, to obtain relevant, reliable audit evidence when using substantive analytical procedures and to design and perform analytical procedure near the end of audit that assists the auditor when forming an overall conclusion as to whether the financial statements are consistent with auditor's understanding of the entity. So students, tell me whether it is clear or not. So many of you, Shubhank, Sonu, Tanu, Vikas, Harsh, you all are able to answer the question correctly, and this shows that you were actually attentive in the class. So read this question carefully and tell me the technique which has been followed by CA Ashutosh. So I'll read the question. CA Ashutosh is the engagement partner with respect to audit assignment of XYZ Limited for financial year 2021. During the course of audit, CA Ashutosh advised one of the team members to apply various techniques available. Okay. You are required to explain, Mr. Rohit, about such techniques. Send in your replies. Students, you will have to learn. Okay? Only understanding won't be sufficient. Yes, it is very, 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 very important, but learning is also very important. Start learning, start following the strategies discussed with you by sir. And we have a class on Sunday. So don't miss that session. We will be starting with a very important chapter, which is chapter number 9, audit of items of financial statement. And why I'm reminding this to you, because it is on Sunday. Then the second session will be on Monday. So do attend those sessions. So send in your reply with respect to second question. So the various techniques. So many of you have answered correctly. Tanu, Harsh, Sandeep, Pooja, Parth, Charu. So the techniques are what? Trend analysis, ratio analysis, reasonableness test, and structural modeling. Okay? And how to learn about all these? See, if this question comes for 4 marks, so you will have to write about all these. Sirf mentioning these techniques won't be sufficient. And it is mentioned, you are required to explain. So trend analysis, what all will come? Commonly used technique hai. Okay? Uses prior period data, या data of 2 or more several periods. ठीक है? क्या करते हैं इसमें? Auditor compares the current data with prior period, और उससे क्या होता है? If any unusual thing is there, if any change is there, to try to understand the factor. Example is what? Salary wala unusual increase. Ratio analysis mein we saw that it can be used for what? Asset, liability, income, expense. Relationship should be there. And ratios, one calculated can be compared. For example, GP ratio can be compared with prior period ya industry ka data. And other ratios can be what? Your trade receive, debtor turnover ratio, inventory turnover ratio. ठीक है? So these are the keywords. Then reasonableness test. Unlike trend analysis, it does not rely on prior period data, but it uses what? Non-financial data. Okay? So auditor uses it to see the account fluctuations and what are the various example: interest expense with respect to interest bearing secure obligations, remember, then the number of employees, so all those examples can be given. Then last is was structural modeling, the statistical model, which uses financial as well as non-financial data of prior period. Why? To predict current year balance, for example linear regression. Okay? So this is the way you need to write and this is the way you need to learn. So Parth is saying, ma'am, how to document substantive analytical procedures. So basically whatever audit procedure the auditor will be performing, like if he's performing certain ratio analysis, if he's doing certain reasonableness test, he'll be keeping all the documents in his file, audit file. Okay, okay Parth. So question number 3, how should an auditor investigate the results of analytical procedures performed during the course of audit? Investigating the results. See, what is meant by investigating? That some significant fluctuation is there now, some inconsistency is there, then only he'll investigate. So how will he do that? There are 2 points. So Pooja is saying inquiring management and obtaining appropriate audit evidence with respect to the management responses, and the other point she's saying that perform other audit procedures. Okay. So let me just take you through the module. See, investigate. If something is inconsistent, some identified fluctuations are there, then only the auditor is going to investigate. Now, so where is this topic given? Let me just take you. Investigating the results of analytical procedures. So he will inquiring of management and obtaining appropriate audit evidence relevant to management response. Audit evidence relevant to management response may be obtained by evaluating those responses, taking into account auditor's understanding of the entity and environment, and with other audit evidence obtained during the course of audit. Performing other audit procedure as necessary. The need to perform other audit procedures may arise when management is unable to provide an explanation, या management नहीं दे पा रहा है, या जो explanation management has given along with the audit evidence obtained, they are what? Inadequate. Inadequate किसने consider किया? Auditor ने. So auditor will do what? He will perform other audit procedures. So clear? Vikas, check your answer. Investigating the results. So question number 4, explain the concept of analytical procedures. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे we'll write essay 520 में जो there is a definition जिसके अंदर there are 2 things, that analytical procedure is in evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. It also encompasses the investigation as is necessary of identified fluctuations, inconsistent relationship, remember, and the difference from the expected results by a significant amount. तो ये सारा आएगा. Also discuss in brief about the timing of applying such procedures. See, this is a 4-mark question, है ना? So timing के लिए planning, testing and conclusion phase पे you will be writing. Planning में you all have seen that we will be writing what it helps in understanding and obtaining an information of the client business, है ना? Potential risk of material misstatement, entry of procedures. ठीक है? Testing में you will write that all these factors are to be considered, and factors you need not explain, just write those factors. And last is completion phase, that individual components पे जो भी आपका analytical procedure का result है, you will be using that at what? At the time of forming an overall conclusion. ठीक है? So clear with respect to 4th point. Fifth question. Analytical procedures include consideration of comparisons of entities, financial information, as well as consideration of relationship. Help explain with the help of example. Quickly send me. Consideration of comparisons of entities, financial information के लिए answer. So students are saying that the techniques which have been discussed by sir are very helpful. Send in your reply with respect to fifth question. See, try to send in the reply considering that it is a 4-mark question. So how will you write in the exam? See, many of you asked me that, ma'am, okay, the answer is mentioned there, but in this chapter, since the time is permitting, I am discussing with you as to what is to be written in the answer. Apart from the discussing the paragraph number, that okay, on this page you can look at the answer, as I always do with the rest of the chapter. Here I am discussing with you the keywords that you need to mention with respect to the marks which has been allotted to this question. Okay? So send me your reply with respect to fifth question. See, part you are saying number of wages multiplied by wages per worker, है ना? But उससे पहले तो you will write ना consideration of comparison of entities financial information में क्या था? That with respect to prior period हो सकता है ना? Let me just take you through the module. This is what? Just a minute. So पहले तो you will write this ना comparable information for prior period and then you will give example. ठीक है? Anticipated result of entity. Example is what your budgets and forecast of industry information. Example is what ratios compared to the industry. ठीक है? Same way with respect to your example of analytical procedures, you will be writing these points. Na? Students, send in your replies with respect to question number 5. Okay? And apart from that, if there is any query which is still unanswered, please send in that query also. I'm waiting for your replies with respect to question number 5. Let me just discuss with you the PPT also. Students, send in your replies. Yes, Charu, you can write. So students, with respect to this chapter now, I have shared a PPT with you. In fact, with respect to chapter number 3 also, I shared it with you. See, these are what key pointers, and these are only for your, reference purpose. It might be possible that some matter I have written only the heading here because this is just an bird's eye view. But for understanding, for learning part, you will have to refer to your module. Question 5 is not understood. Let me just take you through question number 5. See, it says that analytical procedure include, Jamil, this is your query. Analytical procedures include the consideration of comparisons of entities' financial information as well as consideration of relationship explained with the help of example. Okay? So let me take you through the module. So this is the topic which has been asked. Example of analytical procedure having consideration of comparisons of entities' financial information and the relationship. I hope it is clear now. And for your reference, I've also given the answer sheet, whereby the answers are mentioned here. So you may refer to this sheet. Okay? And everything has been uploaded. So please download these PDFs. Okay? So students, whenever I'm uploading any key pointer file, so that is for the purpose of reference only. You need to refer to the module in order to understand and in order to learn the concepts. Okay? So let us just have a look quickly at this. Meanwhile, if there is any doubt, please send in your reply, and also please tell me whether you are able to understand chapter number 8. And students, I have tried that some of the learning must also be done. Like I've tried that it should have been done in the class itself. So please tell me whether you are able to learn also. Surbhi, your answer is absolutely correct. Okay? So let us quickly have a look at this also. So meaning of analytical procedures we have done, and I'm telling you again and again, please refer to this PPT only for revision purposes. But for understanding the concept, for learning the concept, please go to your ICAI module. So meaning is what? Evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. Then we saw that it will include what? Investigation also. Comparison of what data can be done? Client industry. See, here I have not given this topic. So that is why I'm asking you to, refer to the module when you need to learn or understand the concept. This is just, in brief as to what this chapter is all about. So Jamil, I hope your query with respect to question number 5 is clear. Objectives of the auditor are to obtain relevant, reliable audit evidence when using substantive analytical procedure, and to design and perform analytical procedures near the end of audit that assist the auditor when forming an overall conclusion. Okay? And let me just have a look at the query. See, Charu, whatever has been mentioned in your module, okay? So you need to write that explanation. If it is given in a line, you need to write that only. Please tell me whether you are able to understand this chapter or not, and whether learning part is also clear. And in case any queries still left, you can send in. And with respect to preparations of the subject also, you can send, because 5 minutes are left, so I can take up all those queries also. See, just have a look at the PPT. I've mentioned only the keywords. So the explanation is not here. The techniques, I have not explained them here. Only I have explained them, but only few points have been mentioned. So please do not consider it as the sole basis. This is only for your reference. Okay? The explanation of all these 4 points is not here. Okay? Send in your queries. I'll wait for a minute or two, then I'll end this session for today. And I'm repeating again, we have a session on Sunday. So do not miss that lecture. Please refer to the schedule which is uploaded on the portal. So Udin Kamar K Amar, like, so if you are attending the audit lecture for the first time, I'll advise you that please refer to the videos which are available with respect to the initial 7 chapters. Okay? Because those chapters have been discussed in detail and the understanding of all those chapters will be used in the further chapters. Okay? So please go through all those videos. So Charu is saying that she has a reserve of 8 definitions now. So it is good, Charu, but it's high time now. You all need to start learning the definitions and learning the questions as has been suggested by sir. Okay? So students, I hope everything is clear. There is no doubt. And we have done this chapter quite in detail. We have done all the questions. We have gone through the key pointers. We never get time with respect to other chapters to, discuss the questions in so much detail. So with this, hoping that you will learn the definitions, you will start learning the questions. And if you haven't already started, then please start from this chapter. Why? Because this is a small chapter, and when you learn this entire chapter now, you will get confidence. Okay? So see you on Monday now. Oh, sorry, Sunday. See you on Sunday. We have a class with respect to chapter number 9, audit of items of financial statement on Sunday. So see you at 6 p.m. on Sunday. Thank you. Good night. And please start studying now. Thank you. Done. Bye.